Say hello to BMW M's best-selling M car for the first half of 2022. No, it's not an M4, and no, it's not an M3. Instead, it's their electrified brother, the I4 M50. With fuel prices on the rise, could this be the best performance EV on the market? Well, let's find out.
Hi and welcome back to the channel. It's time for another review thanks to BMW Midrand. Today they've given me the keys to a BMW i4 M50, a fully electric M-powered vehicle. It's going to be my first time experiencing an electric car, so I'm super amped, and I'm also really excited to take you guys along for the journey. So let's take a look at some specs and then take it on the road for a test drive. Thanks for tuning into another video. As always, a huge shout out to BMW Midrand for sponsoring this video and of course giving us the opportunity to experience one of the latest and greatest in BMW stable. This is the i4 M50, a fully electric powered vehicle developed by BMW and of course their M division. This specific car is spec'd in a very stunning Aventurian red. It's not a color that I've seen before in person and I think it looks beautiful. While this is not anything new to BMW in terms of electrification in their vehicles, of course it's been happening since the i8 and i3, which has been around for about 8 years or so. Although this is very different to those vehicles, as in this is not a plug-in hybrid, this does not use any sort of combustion motor. This is a full-on electric vehicle.
The i4 M50 has two electric motors, one connected to the front axle and the other to the rear axle. Combined, these motors produce 400 kilowatts and 795 newton meters of torque. This kind of power means that BMW claims it'll do the 0 to 100 km/h sprint in 3.9 seconds.
In terms of styling, it's very easy to mistake this for a normal 4 Series Grand Coupe. And I think this is one of the design features that I like most about this vehicle, that it does look like a normal 4 Series Grand Coupe. While a lot of other manufacturers have gone out with futuristic styling, this here still looks really current and really good, with the benefits of electrification. Like BMW's other electric cars, they have specific I-design grills, as you can see on this i4 M50, and I think they look pretty decent.
The i4 M50 is spec'd with bicolor 19-inch alloys and a gloss black side sill that extends across the side of the vehicle.
The i4 M50 also has M-specific mirrors in ferric grey. At the rear we can see a diffuser, but of course no exhaust, since seeing there are no CO2 emissions. The taillights are shared with the, of course, Grand Coupe version of the 4 Series, which is the same in front in terms of the headlights. Another new design feature which you would also see on the new 2 Series is the door handles, which are flush and of course incorporated into the door rather than sticking out like traditional handles. I think that looks really good. This i4 M50 is also spec'd with comfort access, which means if the car is unlocked, all I have to do is walk up towards the car, provided that the keys are in my pocket, slide my finger along those 3 lines and the car will automatically lock. If I'd like to unlock the car, provided that I do have the keys in my pocket and I'm near enough, all I have to do is put my hand under the lever over here and the car will automatically unlock. Now of course, generally where you would find your combustion engine, here we have it all covered up. You don't see much going on here, but of course underneath is where all the magic happens. Like I mentioned, there are 2 different electric motors, one connected to the front axle and one connected to the rear axle. Boot space is very impressive, with 470 liters when the rear seats are folded up, and of course more than 1,200 liters when the rear seats are folded down. More than enough space for loads of luggage to go on any trip that you need to go on. The Grand Coupe styling also makes it really easy to load luggage in and of course take it out, although you do need to be wary of the tailgate, which sits pretty high up when open. And of course it has the nifty touch of a button closing function. This i4 M50 is also spec'd with the M Performance seats, which are the same seats that you'd find in the M340i as well as the M3 and M4 that are not spec'd with the carbon buckets. The interior is a very familiar place if you've driven any of the modern day BMWs. It does come with the large infotainment screens for your iDrive, as well as your dash for your speedometer and rev counters. There are blue accents around the car to tell you that it is part of BMW's electric fleet. On the dash, in the bottom left corner, you can see your battery capacity, and in the bottom right corner, your current range. So if I put my foot on the brake, hit the start button, you're welcomed by, of course, some amazing graphics from BMW and a nice little sound that lets you know that the car is on. Of course, there's absolutely no engine noise, since there's no combustion engine, so I can't really do a sound test like I'd usually do before heading out, which makes me feel just a little bit awkward. But perhaps I'll get used to this. We have taken a look at BMW's latest iDrive system in the M5, as well as the new 7 Series that we reviewed, so we're not going to get really into that for this review. This vehicle also does feature the latest in BMW interior, so there aren't a lot of buttons or things going on in the center console. Instead, a lot of storage space. I do still miss my shortcut buttons, as well as access to my air conditioning buttons, but I think that is obviously here to stay the way it is, and something we'd probably have to get used to. As you can see, there are aircon functions up here on the iDrive system itself. In terms of interior storage compartments, it's the usual BMW door cards, your 2 cup holders, although we have an ashtray, so I'm assuming this has the smoker's pack. Ashtray over here. Of course, if you don't need that, you can just pop that in the boot. Door card on that side, and the usual glove box, or cubby as we know it as in South Africa. Rear legroom isn't massive, but it's sufficient. The seat is currently in my preferred seating position, and I'm definitely not the tallest of people out there. Okay, now that we are done with taking a look at the design of the car, I think it's time for us to head out and see what it's like to drive. Still really weird getting used to no engine startup noise of any sort in these electric vehicles. So let's take the i4 M50 out on the road. We can talk about some specs, and I'll give you my driving impressions, and then of course we can head back to BMW Midrand where we started. So like I've already mentioned, in terms of interior, it does feel just like the other modern day BMWs, especially the facelift 3 Series and 4 Series with the large digital dash, and of course the large screen. I know digital dashes have been around for a while already, but of course in the facelift one they've opted to go with a very, very long screen across the dash. Personally, I prefer the dash that came in the original M340i, so that is the digital dash but separated between your iDrive screen and your speedometer, etc. in front of you. Although this still does look good, and I think it fits in with most of the other modern day vehicles from other manufacturers. So again, I know I've mentioned this before, I think it was in the 7 Series review, I really, really do miss having my climate controls down here. Again, I know it's quite a hot day, and already I'm searching for where do I up the aircon. So I'm going to go into my climate menu and up the fan speed, just to cool things down a bit. But again, perhaps it's just something that I'm so used to, but yeah, definitely missing those controls over there. So before we get to the driving impressions of the i4 M50, I can already tell you that it has this weird futuristic feel. Maybe weird is the wrong word to use, but for example, the indicator sound, it sounds very acoustic. It's almost like I can hear it echoing around me, which is quite nifty and quite cool to obviously give you that futuristic feel. No engine noise at all is something that's going to take me forever to get used to, of course, especially coming from the M5 and M4 review. The other thing that I also find strange already off the bat is when you let go of the accelerator. Generally in your combustion motors, you would obviously have that sort of coasting. With this, the minute you let off the accelerator, it almost feels like the car wants to stop. It's almost like it's applying brakes for you. Again, that's just something that you need to get used to. So the i4 M50 is powered by 2 electric motors, one connected to the front axle and the other to the rear,
which obviously means it is an all-wheel drive car, or X-drive, since seeing this is a BMW. That means that you have instant shove, because it's an electric motor, and four-wheel drive. The i4 M50, with its 2 electric motors, produces 400 kilowatts of power and 795 newton meters of torque. BMW claims that it will do the 0 to 100 sprint in 3.9 seconds. Now, while there are obviously a lot of other cars that are quicker than that, 3.9 seconds is still blisteringly quick. But that number really is impressive when you think about the weight of this vehicle. Now, by no means is it the largest of vehicles, but of course, it having batteries and the electric motors, it is quite heavy. This vehicle weighs in at 2.2 tons. So, to get 2.2 tons from 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds is definitely astonishing. So the vehicle does play some sort of, I wouldn't want to call it engine noise, but like a thrusting sort of noise from its speakers when you do accelerate. It's not something that I'd ever thought I'd experience. And here we are, 2023, and this is where the world is heading, or rather the motoring world is heading. So in the i4 M50, and I'm pretty sure this follows through with all the other electric vehicles from BMW in today's day and age, and that is the gesture control getting in my way. You have your battery capacity, which is currently at 76% on your dash on the bottom left corner, and then you've got your range on the right hand side, bottom right corner rather, of 202 kilometers at this point in time. BMW claims that this vehicle can do 510 kilometers. So that's a range of 510 kilometers. Of course, there are different aspects that you need to take into consideration for it to achieve that 510 kilometers. How you're driving the vehicle, your weather conditions, and a host of other factors that affect that claimed range. The i4 M50, like other BMWs, has different driving modes. So we've got Eco Pro, Comfort, and Sport, which are changeable, or rather interchangeable, by 3 buttons just underneath the start-stop button. I'm currently in Eco Pro mode. Feels very smooth. Again, there's obviously no gearbox, so there's no gears, no changing of gears of any sort. Again, letting off the accelerator obviously means I'm braking technically without using the brakes, which is quite a strange sensation. So even in Eco Pro mode, I felt a lot of power, but of course not really giving it the beans as you generally would. So I'm going to move over to Comfort mode and see what the experience is like compared to Eco Pro. So I can already tell you that in Eco Pro the vehicle feels a lot more free, and it just sort of glides along a lot more easily without it feeling restricted. In Eco Pro it definitely felt like it was dulled down a lot. That instant torque and instant shove is quite a pleasing feeling, to say the least. This vehicle also has a head-up display, which is quite a futuristic looking one. I've got my kilometer per hour reading, as well as your speed limit reading. So depending on where you are, of course, it'll tell you exactly what the speed limit is. On the road that I was on, the speed limit was 80, and now that I've turned into a smaller street, or rather side street, it's changed to 60 kilometers per hour, which I can see on my head-up display. I keep finding myself waiting for the car to change gears, which is again a strange sensation from the electric motor. I also find myself looking for the shift paddles, which I use quite often in my F3330D. Sometimes I feel like the gearbox doesn't know what it wants to do or what gear I want it to be in, so I find myself using those quite often. Although here I don't have access to any sort of shift paddles, because of course there's no different gears for the car to get through. Okay, next up we are going to put the car in sport mode, and that gives us a very cool sound. It's almost like I've switched on something in a spaceship. On deceleration there's also a different sound that's played through the speakers. I quite like it, to be honest with you. So I'm not too sure if my mic is picking up that sound,
Even though this is a four-wheel drive car, it is rear-wheel drive biased, and I definitely could feel that thrusting out of that corner. The tail did seem to swing out just a little bit, but of course BMW's four-wheel drive system had everything in check. So, to be honest with you, I think BMW is understating their 0 to 100 time of 3.9 seconds. It definitely feels faster, but again, it could just be the fact that there's instant torque and power there all the time, which makes it a different sort of feeling, not something that I've ever experienced or something that most of us would be used to. This car being spec'd with the M Sport seats, they are very supportive and very comfortable. I think it's a must-have. They look amazing. They look way, way better than the normal sport seats. Not that they look bad, but of course if you have the option and the cash to spec these, they are a must-have. Again, in terms of the possible range that you get out of the car, it really is dependent on how you drive it and of course weather conditions. I have been researching a little bit on this, and I see that there are some data sheets out there saying that this car can do about 460 with city driving. Oddly enough, and this is something that I need to research a little bit more, on the highway the range seemed to have dropped to about 375 kilometers, and that was in cool weather. In mild weather, the ranges seem to have increased. So where it could have done 470 kilometers on the highway in mild weather, according to those data sheets, it showed that it did closer to the 500 range, or just over 500. And of course, with your city driving, that was up to the 400s. The steering feel in this car, I'm finding to be really, really enjoyable. It doesn't feel too light or too numbing. It does have a slight heaviness, and again, I'm not too sure if I'm imagining this, but it does feel a little bit heavier than your normal 3 Series or 4 Series. This car is also spec'd with Harman Kardon sound, so of course it has a really, really good sound system if you're into that, and of course you need to enjoy some jams over and above the electric sounds that are being played through the speakers. You also get different displays depending on your driving mode, on your digital dash in front of you. Of course in Eco Pro there's a lot less going on. I will show you those differences shortly. So of course, this being an electric car, one of the main points of discussion is charging it. So BMW claims that with a proper fast charger, you can get up to 140 kilometers of range with a 10-minute charge. However, with your public charging stations, you probably get about 100 kilometers for a 20-minute charge. Whether or not that's ideal, of course, depends on the kind of trip that you're doing or how much time you have to actually plan those charging times. So, given that we are in a country flooded with load shedding, of course you would have to have your setup at home specific to having an electric car. Although with electric cars becoming a more and more common thing, I'm pretty sure you'd find charging points at majority of the malls or BMW dealerships that you'd visit. I was chatting to a family member of mine who recently was considering an iX3, the BMW iX3, and we had a brief conversation about charging anxiety. So he and I both do regular long trips to Polokwane, and that's basically from Johannesburg to Polokwane is about 310 kilometers, obviously from where we live in Johannesburg. And he and I both mentioned that obviously, we wouldn't be comfortable taking that on a long distance trip given the range and not knowing how long it would last. So obviously you would have to do extensive trips around town to see how much range you actually get out of these cars. But again, I don't think that these electric cars yet, rather, would be suitable for your very, very long distance trips, given that a lot of our filling stations aren't equipped with the necessary charging points, etc. So for now, I would suggest buying an electric car like this for your day-to-day driving. You can save on fuel, hook up an inverter, battery, solar system at home, and that's where you're in the money, and you're obviously saving a lot, and in terms of cost of fuel, and you're also saving the environment, because obviously there are no emissions. The i4 M50 is an extremely comfortable and compliant ride. Even though it has an M badge on it, by no means is it a hardcore track feeling car. The suspension is comfy, soft, easy on the bumps. It soaks up the road pretty well. Even though I know I just said that technically I wouldn't buy an electric car for my long distance trips, I'm pretty sure that you would be very, very comfy in the seat for many hours on the road. Of course, I have been pushing this car relatively hard, just to obviously get a feel of the electric motors and the power. When we left, my range was sitting at 202 kilometers, and now I see it's dropped to 192, and I've used about 3% of the battery. So we're going to go back to comfort mode, just to ease up things and obviously save up some power. But overall, I think that this car is a brilliant car. And one of the things that I love most about majority of BMW's electric cars is that they look like the normal BMW range. So for example, this i4 M50 looks like a 4 Series Grand Coupe, whereas a lot of the other manufacturers give their electric cars too much of a futuristic look. Some of them are really not easy to stomach. But I do understand that design is going into that futuristic way. But that's one of the main things that I really do love about BMW's electric division, is that they aren't losing the essence and the soul of BMW in making these changes and these moves to electric powered cars. The i4 M50 is a great sedan to have for you and your family. Like I mentioned, there is enough room at the back. I'm, again, not a very tall person, so in my seating position, that gives the person at the back more than enough leg room. It's got a huge boot, especially if the seats are folded down, and if you need to shove your golf kit in there, or anything else, obviously, that's a little bit larger than usual. You can drop those rear seats and fit in a lot of stuff. If you have a home that's equipped for charging, if you live near places that have charging points, and you want to go electric, and of course not lose out on the fun of driving, I think the i4 M50 is a really brilliant option. This one is for sale. It is part of BMW Midrand's approved used cars. All you have to do is get in touch with them and ask for Megan, and of course she can hook you up with a deal on this vehicle. After having driven this i4 M50, am I ready to move to the electric world? To be honest with you, not quite yet. While it is a brilliant car, and of course the technology and electrification is mind-blowing, there's something about the petrol head in me. Of course this doesn't use petrol, so there's something about the petrol head in me that still longs for that V8 raw or straight 6 raw. And you know, the feeling of those gear changes, etc., that you obviously just don't get in the i4 M50. Although as a daily driver, I think I would take this hands down over my F30 330D, because of course that isn't exactly a car that I've bought for theatrics or driving dynamics, etc. That's obviously more for economy, comfort, and I think this does that brilliantly well. Thank you, sir. So we are back at BMW Midrand. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit more in terms of what I'm seeing from the driver's seat. The head-up display, the change in the graphics between your different driving modes. And yeah, then we can call this video a day. Something else that I like about the i4 M50 is the way it handles its size. So not sheer size. It isn't the largest of cars, but it's also not the smallest. but it's a 2.2 ton, and it definitely does not feel like a 2.2 ton car when you're driving it. The steering is light, it seems to handle its weight well around corners, and it's just a really, really pleasant place to be. So like I mentioned, the digital dash does change depending on the driving mode you're in. I've put it in Eco Pro. As you can see, it's a different theme. Comfort as well as Sport, which gives you a little boost function over there. So that brings our time with the i4 M50 to an end. As always, a huge shout out and thanks to our sponsors for this video, BMW Midrand, and of course a special thanks to you as my viewers and subscribers for obviously making this channel what it is, and obviously giving me the motivation and reassurance that I need to keep on making videos. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, I have been checking my stats. A lot of my viewers aren't subscribed to the channel. I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button and of course hit the bell notification so you don't miss any updates. So I guess that means we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in.